Okay. All right. So we are now going to jump into the important elements that you should have in your lesson. Okay. So let me share my screen. This here's a very nice house that I would like to own and live in, but I unfortunately do not. It's just a Google stock photo. But I like to think of these pillars as like the important foundation that you need to have a good lesson, right? So you need to go and prepare. And so I would say the lesson planning is that foundation. You need to have a solid foundation for anything to be built on top, right? You need to have a plan. And so we're going to sort of talk about the elements of a lesson plan with what I'm going to call the 6 pillars of your plan, which are these 6 elements. And I'm going to talk about these 6 elements and give examples of each through that lesson 1 that we just told you about. So lesson 1, reviewing past multiplication, reviewing this concept of equal grouping to solve multiplication problems. Okay, so the 6 pillars, we're going to jump into the first one is the objective. Your lesson needs to have an objective. Okay, this sounds obvious, but really you have to write it out for it to be really clear, because sometimes even when you think you know what you're going to teach, when you actually teach it, you're like, whoa, I taught way too much. It's because you didn't have a clear objective. Okay, so what do you want your students to specifically accomplish at the end of that one lesson? Be clear, be brief, be specific. And the template that everybody uses is students will be able to dot, dot, dot. Okay. Students will be able to verb, strategy to skill. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay. So in this case, students will be able to, the acronym is SWBAT, students will be able to use equal grouping. So the verb here is use. The strategy is equal grouping to describe multiplication. So solving multiplication, that's the whole skill. But the strategy to get there, one of them is equal grouping. And then the verb I used is use. Okay. This is actually a really helpful verb chart that I look at when I want to really think about what I want my students to do. So it goes from like the most simple, like remembering, which is just like memorizing stuff, all the way to the most advanced, like highest thinking skill, which is creating. So you want your like student, my student will be able to evaluate blah 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 by the end. My student will be able to categorize. My student will be able to examine or summarize or discuss, all of these different things. Okay. And this presentation will be shared after, so you don't have to write anything down. All right. So that's the objective. So you have a clear idea of what you want your students to learn at the end. Now you jump into the hook. Okay, it is what it sounds like. It's just an opening, and there's 2 things that the hook usually has. First is you're usually reviewing the past thing you taught, just really quickly, and you want it to be interesting, so then they're like right off the bat engaged, right? This is very short. It's 2 to 5 minutes, and so for that lesson 1, reviewing multiplication, this is my hook. So I tell my student or students to, go in their house and grab 2 stuffed animals, 2 of their favorite stuffed animals, and then bring it back to the computer and show it to everybody, show it to me. Okay. And then I ask the student, how many are there in all? So because you guys are doing one-on-one tutoring, you guys can tell your student your student goes and grabs the stuffed animals, and you also have to grab the stuffed animal because it's multiplication. You need more than one. And then ask your student, how many stuffed animals are there in all, right? And then how do they get that number? Have them talk it through, be like, oh, I counted all of them, or oh, I saw that both of us have the same amount of stuffed animals. So something like that. Okay, so that's the hook, kind of something fun, like a mini scavenger hunt. All right. And then after that, you get to the actual teaching. Okay. The direct instruction. We call it a mini lesson. It's the I do. So I meaning the teacher. It's short, direct instruction with a narrow focus. You're talking about one thing. Okay. You're teaching. You're literally now teaching that skill or concept. This is the part where the teacher does most of the talking. So this should be 10 to 20 minutes max. young students, especially you guys, they're not like, they can't like sit there for an hour and like listen to you talk. Like even college students find that very, very boring. So we definitely shouldn't be doing with our younger students. So I would say direct instruction should only be 10 to 20 minutes max. Okay. So an example would be, give me a second. I'm gonna try to pull up the whiteboard to show you how you guys would do this. Like, do you see it? You see the whiteboard? Oh, wait, I don't even see it. Give me a second. So I would pull up the whiteboard. Okay, here we go. And then let's say, and then I'm going to show them, oh, both of us. So there were, let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, so this is my pile of stuffed animals. This is your pile of stuffed animals. We're doing double digit, right? Double digit multiplication. So let's say, I just realized that the two stuffed animals example doesn't work. Let's say that we had them grab 10 markers. Okay, so I grabbed 10 markers and they grabbed 10 markers. And so then now I'm going to teach. I'm going to be like, okay, we both had, I would draw 10 circles or 10 markers. Actually, this makes more sense. I don't know why I'm drawing circles, but I would draw 10. And I'd be like, oh, how many? Oh, we counted them all. And oh, there were 20 markers in total, right? And then I would say, what is this? This is called equal grouping. I would type it, equal grouping. Okay, there are two equal groups here. And I would make this into a number sentence. How? I would do, oh, there's two equal groups. Okay. Oh, this is the time symbol. So number of equal groups. And how many things are in each group? 10. And so then we found out that the answer is 20. Okay. So that is a sped up version. But do you see, I was doing all the talking. I'm not asking them any questions. They won't know anything. So I'm going to tell them first. And it's quick, it's short, it's focused. Okay. After that, after the I do comes
Sorry, can I ask a quick question?
yes, please.
So I noticed that you use the words equal grouping. It sounds kind of technical, and
Mhm.
I know, well, for me, I'm not like a professional teacher, so
Mhm.
I was wondering, do we have to sort of like know these technical terms when we're preparing to teach?
So no, right? I would say no, because the teacher has technically already taught that in school. And as a tutor, you're supplementing, right? So you might see those terms on the worksheet and your student might not really understand them. But as long as you understand like what equal grouping means, then you can support them. You can give them more practice in that concept. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
It's also
Um,
a lot of the students, at least for me, because I teach on Saturday, so they already learned some of the stuff Monday to Friday. When I say something and they're confused, they will ask using their own vocabulary, like, "Oh, Miss Doris, is that the same thing as this?" And then I'll be like, "Oh yeah, it is the same thing." And then um I know moving forward that since that's the vocabulary that they know, that I'll use this vocabulary. So you don't really need to know all of the technical jargon as long as it's something that they can understand. And if they have a better way of using, like a better vocabulary that is the same vocabulary or the same meaning, then you should be able to use that too. The kids are really intuitive and they have a lot of that knowledge already.
Okay, great.
okay. So when you're tutoring and there's something they don't get or there's something you want to introduce to them, this mini lesson part is where you do the talking. Okay, now they have to practice it, right? Practice what you just taught them. Rather than just sending them off to go do it on their own, I would say they need some more support. And so this is called guided practice. This is we do now. So I would give them a sample problem. Like I would give them 12 times 3 equals question mark. I give them that number sentence. And then we do it together. I'd be like, okay, 12 times 3. How many groups can we draw for this? And then they would answer. And then I would say, like, how many do I draw in each group? And then I'm drawing and they're answering. So we're doing it together, right? Yeah. So I would say this part really depends on what you're doing and what you're teaching. It could take a long time, or if it's just like very simple problems, it could be very simple. But I would say like 15 minutes about, so they can really talk it through with you. This is really the time that they're exploring. So they're not going to get it right, probably. But this is where like you support them, right? Okay. Moving on. Finally, so it's I do, we do, and then now it's independent, it's you do. Okay, this is when you give them a few practice problems of the thing they're struggling with, and they try to do it on their own without any intervention from you. So this is like I think of it as like an informal assessment. Though depending on how they answer the questions is whether or not they got it from you, right? And again, it depends on what you're doing with them, but this could take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. I would really load most of my lesson, like let's say it's an hour, load most of my lesson with like doing, not like talking, like me talking necessarily, but a lot of them doing. So this, if they do it well, then you can move on. If they are really having trouble, then you spend more time here. You go back to the guided practice and do it together, and then have them do it alone again. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And then lastly, we have the wrap up. So this is like the last 5 to 10 minutes. It's really to provide closure. And things you can do are reiterating your main teaching point, having students create their own problem or their own example, clarifying misunderstandings, giving feedback, which is always includes something they did really well and something we have to work on next time. An extension if they did really well, and then like reflection, so asking them like, what did you think of it, or what did you really have trouble with? So here, like my example is, I would have my students create their own multiplication stories with double digit and single digit. And to make it a little, more like culturally relevant, I would say, draw the diagram using your family's favorite food, and make a question into that with that. And I would pick a student, or rather your tutee would share it with me and I would try to solve it. Something like that. Okay. So my lesson put together with these 6 pillars: objective, hook, I do, we do, you do, and then wrap up. Does this make sense? Yeah. Okay. Oh, all right.
Okay, so then that brings us to the second lesson in the unit. So we're working on a roadmap, right? We just finished all the definition. We set up a good foundation for us to better understand how we're going to multiply by connecting it with prior knowledge, and then also learning some new equal grouping facts and models and all of that. So then we're moving more towards trying to get to finally understanding or learning the actual topic, which was to multiply double digit and single digit. So your lesson 2, obviously you don't want to jump from the foundation automatically to, all right, when you do 12 times 3, you multiply the ones place and then you multiply the tens place, because there's going to be a big gap between what they learned and then how are you getting from that now to this sudden like formula kind of thing. And I know I've taught like 7th and 8th grade before, and they automatically jump to formulas. But when I ask them, why did you do that? They have absolutely no idea why you multiply the ones place, why you do this and why you do that. They don't know the steps because teachers usually just teach them the standard algorithm or the shortcuts and they go from there. So using these models is really important, especially for when you have a special learner. So somebody who learns better through models or through visuals, you want to make sure that you're differentiating and you're reaching all of the students, because not everyone is going to understand a formula. And then the other way around too, not everyone is going to understand a model or a visual. So you want to make sure that you're giving them all of the strategies. So then at the end of the unit, you can decide, or the student can decide which strategy works best for them. Okay, so this one we are going to actually practice. So Karen just did the teaching portion of this workshop. She taught you guys how to do the 1 to 6 for each of them. And then now we're doing kind of like the group work here. So between the 5 of us, we're going to look at this half completed lesson plan, and then we are going to try to fill in the missing pieces. So our objective for the second one is students will be able to, and then the strategy is use the array model. And then the skill is to multiply double digit by single digit whole numbers. So I wrote down the mini lesson and the guided practice. So before we go to all of that, let's think about a hook. How would you hook your student into learning about this or into getting into this lesson? Do you guys know what an array model is? Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say I would need. I don't. Can you explain what it is more?
Yeah. I'll explain what it is. An array model, I don't have a whiteboard. I mean, I do, but okay, I do. Yeah, actually. Okay, so an array model, just think of it as like a Connect Four board. You know how it's like here. Let me share. Am I doing it?
Yes.
Okay. So you know how so I would give this example 3 times 4 is equal to whatever. For an array model, what you would do is you would draw circles or squares or whatever it is that's going to help you better understand. So I like circles. So you always start with the first number. So 1, 2, 3. That's your row, and then you're repeating that the number of times is in the second number. So 1, 2, 3. That's the second time. That's the third time. Oops. And that's the fourth time. Ideally, these circles would all be the same size, but we have technology issues here. So then at the end, they would see that they did 3 columns of 4 rows. So it's an array because they should all be perfectly equal because it needs to be in this perfect box kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay. So based on that lesson, based on your understanding of that lesson, how would you guys hook them into this lesson without just jumping right away into that? The hook is always hard for me, especially with online learning. It's like, what are you really going to do? You know, you're not in a classroom.
Maybe we can, if they have candy, we can ask them to like arrange it on the table or on the floor or something.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So always something with like multiple of the same thing, right? You don't want to ask them to grab like 2 paper clips and 3 pens and 5, you know, like you always want to be you always want it to be the same thing. So definitely candy. And then if they get it right, maybe they can eat their candy at the end of the lesson or something. What else?
To add on to that, maybe I'd be like, oh, I have a challenge for you. The challenge is to grab 12 candies and arrange it with the same number of rows and columns. Like, see if you can do that.
Yeah, and then that would bring the division part into it or the connection between multiplication and division. So that would be cool to come back to afterwards. Yeah, so definitely something especially through virtual learning, something where you can grab something that they have in their space. It definitely helps them break like the sitting down and learning kind of thing. They get to explore their space a little bit more. They become more mindful of what they can do at home. And it makes math seem more like real instead of just like adding random things or subtracting random things. So yeah, I really like that hook. So grab a bunch of candies or grab something and arrange them into a perfect rectangle with the same number in each column, same number in each row. And then count how many do you have going across and how many do you have going vertically or up and down. And then those 2 numbers become your factors or your multiplication sentence. So then the mini lesson, I literally just did it on the whiteboard. The teacher is going to present the multiplication sentence and then start doing the circles herself or himself. And then also what I like to do with models is go the other way around. So you would present the array first, like an array of 3 rows and 4 columns, and then ask them to write the multiplication sentence. Because it's easy to just go one way, but then you really enhance the understanding if you're going multiple ways, going backwards. Knowing that 3 times 4 is the same thing as 4 times 3 also is important. So all of these things is you could throw them in and they can play around with their actual whatever the candy or whatever they have in front of them. And in the guided practice, the teacher is going to present a multiplication sentence and then now they can create an array. So if I give you 6 times 15, how can you create an array? Draw it for me. Or if I give you this array that has 7 rows and 12 columns, you write a multiplication sentence for me. So you see how I'm giving them part of it and then they're filling in the other half. And then what would you guys do for independent practice?
One thing that, I try and do for independent practice is ask them to, like make up their own problems. So they're thinking about problems and they also solve it themselves. So I guess that's a way to sort of interact with them.
Yeah, definitely. And they feel in control because they can create their own problems instead of you giving them a list of 10 questions to solve. Good. So, yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts?
I would say if maybe they're not advanced enough to like go and make their own, I would just give them like five problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then have them go work on it for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. So anything that you where they are doing the work independently and you can assess which parts they're having difficulty with, because I know sometimes it seems like a student understands something, but then they do something by themselves and you can see that they actually didn't get it. So your independent practice, like Karen said, is definitely some kind of an assessment. And then you can figure out where to go next from there. And then what about the wrap up? How would you guys completely end everything, put it all together?
I usually like to do exit slip because it's a kind of open space for students to fill in what they've learned and what they find difficult to understand. And then you get a better understanding of what you will have to deal with in your next lesson, and how the students react to your lesson today. Yeah, I think that would be a great way to wrap up the lesson.
Do we know what an exit slip is?
Let me try to find. So it's kind of like a paper slip, not big. Let me show you something like this. And some teachers like colorful ones. And then the teacher will usually ask a question like, what do you find most difficult in understanding in this lesson? And then the students will write down their answers and then hand it to the teacher before they leave the classroom. So that would be one way. And then it's good to have them keep track of their learning process. So when they finish like the whole unit, then they will see how the ones they used to find difficult dealing with, the problems actually get easier. And they will find that, oh, they really made progress.
And I love exit slips in-person teaching because it's literally like a ticket that you give to the teacher, and it's like a definitive, I'm done with the class, here's take my ticket, I'm finished, I'm out of here kind of thing. So maybe you guys can do the same thing. And I do that kind of with my students on the weekends because I have a big class. So it's like whenever I get your exit slip, they submit it on Google Classroom. So whenever I get your exit slip, you're free to go. So then they can only leave once they've submitted it. So then eventually my class will dwindle down to like 19, 18, 17, 16. And then I get down to like 2 kids who have absolutely no idea what to write for the exit slip. And then I get some time to do some individual work with them. Obviously, that's not your case for tutoring, but there's still an opportunity for you to be like, okay, thank you for your exit slip. This is the end of the lesson. So it's a really good way to definitively end the lesson.
Yeah. And exit slips are good for, like Sophie said, reflection space. But if you're doing it online, which we're all virtual now, there's no way to hand something physically. And you don't have Google Classroom. So I'm thinking a way to do this would be just like with simple Google Docs, like one page is one day and it's like a journal. So then like lesson 1, they fill in the exit slip on the first page. And then like lesson 2, they go on to the second page, something like that. So you can like keep it all together as well.
Yeah, I like that idea. And then they can like look back to lesson 1. Yeah. And I really like, and I'm a counselor, so I'm a social emotional person. I really like the how did you feel about today's lesson? I think that's such a great way to gauge how students are feeling. And especially with the emojis, depending on your student's age range, if they can pick like, I was angry about the lesson, it tells you a lot. Like other than just I understood or I didn't understand, like I felt really upset about the lesson, then you can, go deeper into that. So definitely using the social emotional aspect is helpful as well.
I found an exit slip on like Google Forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But I also really like the idea of like summarizing everything on one Google Doc as opposed to like having students fill out a form at every class. I don't know if there was like a way to like group the forms in one place, but there might be.
I think there is actually. I think if you use the same link, and then the setting that you
Oh.
select is like can submit multiple times, or like it doesn't ask for the name or something, you can technically submit multiple answers on a form. And then on Google Form, there's like a button where it converts all the answers into a spreadsheet. So you'd be able to see as your student fills it in each week, it would show up on the spreadsheet automatically.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Google is an amazing platform.
Yeah, it really is.
Monopoly, yeah.
And then one last thing that I wanted to add, just because I put it in parentheses, I know Karen gave you guys the adjusted time for like the approximated time for each part, but feel free to adjust that based on what students you have and what your students need. I always say to overplan. So if your mini lesson is only going to take 5 minutes, take into account that might be some questions or whatever. So I would round up to like 7 or 8 minutes. And it's always good to keep these times in parentheses so that in the end, let's say you have like 15 extra minutes left, where can you put in the extra time? Maybe you can add like a question and answers part at the end. Maybe you don't have enough time, so you need to cut down somewhere. So keeping that time is really, really important. Honoring your students' time and your own time is also really important. So just keep that in mind as well.
Okay, so moving on to the third part, which is you do. So now I'm putting another link in the chat. And so later I was thinking, wait, Doris, is this your screen? Are you sharing your screen or?
Oh, it's me.
Oh, okay. So it's okay. Can you move on to the next?
Oh,
okay, it's all right.
what you want me to do?
Yeah, thank you so much. So because we only have 2 people, and so I was thinking, are you comfortable doing it your own? Like, is it okay if you both do like individual planning? Because if you open the Google Doc, it will lead you to our discussion. So it's a Google Doc, and we have already listed objectives, hook, I do, we do, you do, and a wrap up. So our, wait, where is it? So the focus is on standard algorithm. So 2 digits by 1 digit. So it's like 21 times, let's say 6. And with numerical expression, how are you going to teach and help students understand a more abstract way of multiplication, solving multiplication? Are you comfortable with doing it on your own?
Oh, hi, Stella.
Hey,
You guys are finished?
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. Okay, so sharing. Okay,
check it out.
now that you're done, will any one of you like to share? Like briefly go over what you've discussed?
Anything like interesting or any questions or confusions you had while you were doing it?
Exactly. Or any new discovery when you discussed?
I think we were pretty much on the same page for all of these, actually.
Great. It's pretty much straightforward, actually. Okay, so it's pretty much complete and really wholesome and structured. I really like it that you started with what we've discussed and changed it into like a mini scavenger hunt, which is really fun. I think what I would add on to would be to connect it to the second lesson we've talked about, the array model, because that's more of a visual part. And then for this lesson, we're moving on to something more abstract. So you can show them like what the difference is. So you can have different ways of representing a simple idea and concept. Karen, can you go back to the slide?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And so, okay, the next, please. Okay, thanks. And so what I did previously was, as you see, I connected with the area model. And I would like to share something in the end for the independent practice because I saw this online and I really like it. Pyramid, thank you. Oh, so where is it? Okay. So you can actually find a lot of interesting worksheet online. And with this one, double digits by simple digit multiplication, this teacher designed the worksheet by connecting it with riddles. So if you finish doing all the multiplication and then you search for the letters, the alphabetic letters, and then you will get your riddle, the answer of the riddle. So this will be actually a fun way to engage your students when they do independent learning. And since you're both doing tutoring, so one-on-one, if there happen to have you've happened to have another student, so like 2 or more students, you can actually do pair work too. So it will help the student who is having trouble understanding your lesson, but in a more informal way, like, because I think children have their own language and sometimes they can communicate better than when we teach them like in a single way. So this is actually a good way. So there are a lot of free resources online that you can turn to. And sorry, Karen, back to the slides.
I actually had one more. I had one thing to say about the lesson plan that you guys made. So it's great. It's comprehensive. So you guys had put make your own question next to independent practice. And I would say that making your own question is actually something that's quite advanced. They would really need to understand it very well to be able to make their own question, right? And so that I wouldn't put that in independent practice just yet. Maybe that's like extension or wrap up. For independent practice, I would literally just give them practice problems. And then they would just need to simply work it out.
One thing that I did in my last class actually that the student really enjoyed was it wasn't so much like him making up his own problem. It was we were doing 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication, and I just asked him to pick numbers that he liked. I asked, "What's your favorite number?"
Okay.
Like just give me 2 random numbers that you like or you want to try yourself, and then he really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Oh, that is a really good idea. Yeah. So even within practice sets, like something as concrete as math, you can still put some student choice by like just having them choose numbers.
So
Yeah.
it's not like he's creating his own word problem or anything, but he
Yeah.
still feels, or they still feel like they have a say in like the types of problems they're doing. And I guess if, I asked, what's your favorite number? They feel like, oh, it's that number is cool because, and they give a little like anecdote, which is cute.
Yeah. I love that. That is a great way to empower your student.
Thank you for sharing, Anika.
I also wanted to add one thing about your the hook. So and this comes up later on with the other consideration slide, but we want to take into consideration the situation that our students are in. So I've done a lot of scavenger hunts with my students too, but they've gotten yelled at for taking things into their room. Like I'd asked them to go get a fork or something and they got yelled at by their grandma for taking a fork. So the scavenger hunt, although it's a great way to engage your student into their space, also try to figure out what their situation is at home, because the parents or anybody in their house or place, maybe they don't have something, that's also another consideration. So just be very careful with that stuff. And make sure that they're in a comfortable enough space to communicate that with you. So if they can't do something because they don't have it, make sure that you set up a relationship with them so that they feel like they can tell you, well, I don't have 35 markers, like make sure that you have that relationship with them. It's very important.
Yeah.
Also, if I could just add one thing, so this summer, something that worked really well for me in my class is that there's a lot of websites that have like online games where, especially for younger students, you can like count coins and you can like see a visualization of coins or marbles or like physical objects that are replicated on the screen itself. So that's something that you can do like just on your browser rather than asking them to go and get something they may not have or may not be allowed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm putting all these ideas down. Another one that kids love is, of course, they like to watch videos, and you can find a video of anything now in the world. So,
Cyber Chase was a big hit in
Oh yeah.
my Session B class.
what?
I
What?
remember, yeah.
What was a big
Cyber
hit?
Chase.
Oh, Cyber Chase! Oh my god, I love Cyber Chase.
Yeah, I think I remember you commenting on my lesson plan that like,
Cyber Chase.
yeah, go back to Cyber Chase. That was in our childhoods.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. So great. All right. Oh, there's also like songs. Like there's like math songs. There's songs about everything, and having a song is a really great way to engage a student as well. Okay.
I also think that it's great when when we do the we do session and then you include it to have them explain
Yeah.
why we use that process.
Yeah.
I really like this one because then you have them constantly thinking what they're doing and why they do it. So I think it's really important
Yeah.
before they head on to the individual practice.
Mhm.
Make sure they
Yeah.
get it. They actually understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're running short of time.
I'm just gonna hand it over to Doris. To wrap
Doris?
it up.
Okay, so if we put all of these 3 lessons together, you can see that we essentially just taught them how to multiply. And like Karen said, mentioned in the way beginning an hour ago, it's just because it's a topic doesn't mean it could be taught all in one lesson. And I know that for if you've worked with students who are, on grade level or above, this might be something that you can bang out in like 5 minutes, but you also need to keep in mind that there are students who struggle a bit and you can't just assume that they'll get the standard algorithm right away. So I always think that you should start low and then build your way up, because it's always easy to build your way up. But if they're lost first lesson, it's going to be really hard to get them back. So lessons 1, 2, and 3 were, we call this scaffolding in the education field. They were scaffolded because you're building it on top of the prior lesson instead of just, this is a standard algorithm, let's practice. They're really, instead of just knowing how to do the process, they're really understanding the concept. And then it makes, when they go to double digits, you can use the array model, you can use a standard algorithm, you can use equal grouping. So they can utilize the same strategies with different topics. So we're about teaching strategies, not topics.
One more thing, if I'm just trying to give a context that's not math. Let's say you were tutoring science, and then they're learning like mammals right now, and then each, like, you could have spent like literally one lesson on like one feature of a mammal. Like mammals all have to have like what thing, and then spend like a portion of the class. You don't have to squeeze everything into one lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So then we also talked about the multicultural aspect that also ties into the 4th bullet, which is how will I differentiate my lesson for different learners? Since you guys are tutoring, it'll be really easy for you to differentiate your lesson because you only need to accommodate for one learner. So figure out where your student is, meet your student where they are. Do not try to bring them up to your expectations of where they should be in 4th grade or 5th grade or whatever. Meet them where they are and help support them to get to higher levels. The vocabulary and language we talked about earlier, Stella, you brought up. Do we need to know that special vocabulary? I mean, you should know things like what a factor is and what a product is, but in terms of like other things, I think it's pretty flexible. We talked about the time. Same with materials. If you're going to do something like a scavenger hunt, you need to think about what's feasible for your students. So go and grab $50 might not be feasible, right? So think about what it is that you will need, what it is that your student might need. And potential confusions. Always ask your student, did you understand? Is there anything that I could help you with? Is there anything you didn't understand? Always come back to things even in the future. So once you start doing double digit by double digit and they are having a hard time with the standard algorithm, dial it back and bring it back to the array model and then start from there. So always go backwards and try to fill in the gaps instead of moving too fast. And that concludes our workshop. We are so super grateful that both of you made it. We are confident that you will now be expert lesson planners. And we're also here. Stella, I just saw your message in the Slack channel. So I am your liaison. So you know that you can reach out to me if you ever need anything. Anika, you've been here for almost a year now, so you know the drill as well. And yeah, we're really, really grateful to have had you here today. Thank you.